We begin tonight, keeping them honest, with a story that is frankly hard to believe. You're going to want to sit down for this one. Nearly 1 month to the day of the horrific shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, in which 26 people were killed, including 20 children. Tonight, we expose a number of people who are claiming that the Sandy Hook shootings were staged. Now, there are always conspiracy theorists lurking online who come up with some horrifically outrageous claims, and normally we would not dignify these kind of claims with our airtime. These claims are obviously sickening to many in Newtown who've spent the past 4 weeks crying and consoling, burying friends and family members, trying to figure out how to restart their lives. As I said, normally we wouldn't even mention these conspiracy theories. But it turns out one of the people who's peddling one version of this conspiracy theory is actually a tenured associate professor at Florida Atlantic University, a state university that gets taxpayer money. His name is James Tracy. This is a picture of him. This is what he looks like. James Tracy is his name. Now, he claims the shooting did not happen as reported and may not have happened at all. Here's what he wrote on his personal blog, and I quote, "One is left to inquire whether the Sandy Hook shooting ever took place, at least in the way law enforcement authorities and the nation's news media have described." Tracy makes the case, if you want to call it that news organizations and the government may have worked together to dupe you, the public, in order to gain support for gun control laws. He even is suggesting that the government may have hired trained crisis actors to aid in this ruse. That's right, trained crisis actors. He's not convinced the parents whose children were killed are really who they say they are. In his blog, Tracy, again, a professor, suggests they may have been, and I quote, "trained actors working under the direction of state and federal authorities and in coordination with cable and broadcast network talent to provide tailor-made crisis acting," end quote. Tracy even cites a company called Crisis Actors that provides actors to use in safety drills and the like. Apparently, that is supposed to bolster his case. Now, by the way, there is such a company, and they are appalled by his comments. In a statement today, they said, and I quote, "We're outraged by Tracy's deliberate promotion of rumor and innuendo to link crisis actors to the Sandy Hook shootings. We do not engage our actors in any real-world crisis events, and none of our performances may be presented at any time as real-world event or as a real-world event." Now, when a local reporter caught up with Tracy and asked him about this outrage his theories might trigger, here's what he said. Listen.
You had 20 families that were mourning, that buried children. Are you concerned about that at all?
Well, I think that the entire country mourned about Sandy Hook. And yet, once again, the investigation that journalistic institutions should have actually carried out never took place, as far as I'm concerned. I think that we need to, as a society, look at things more carefully. Perhaps we, as a society, have been conditioned to be duped.
Now, I don't even really know what that means, what he is saying, what the words coming out of his mouth mean. To suggest the reporters on the ground didn't work to find out what happened there on the ground is beyond crazy. Everybody asks questions, but that's what we do. Journalism isn't a perfect science, of course, but to suggest that somehow means the shootings didn't happen, that 20 children weren't killed, that families didn't suffer and aren't still suffering is beyond comprehension and obviously deeply offensive to many. As we said, Tracy's not the only one spinning conspiracy theories on YouTube and online. This is from a website whose name I'm not going to use because I frankly don't want to give them extra traffic. Some are even claiming that 6-year-old Emily Parker, killed in Sandy Hook, didn't actually die. Now, as proof, they point to a dress, the dress she was wearing in a family photo before the shooting. It's the same dress that Emily's little sister wore when President Obama met with victims' families. So the people online, these conspiracy theorists, are saying that's actually Emily on President Obama's lap. It's a sickening claim, obviously. There's no other word for it. And there's another one on another website I'm not going to name either. They even use an interview that Noah Posner's mother, Veronique, did on this program to make its point. Here's some of that interview before I tell you the absurd theory. Watch the conversation I had with her first. How are you holding up? I mean,
most of the time I'm kind of numb, you know. I think about, and I think every mama out there can relate to the fact of how long it takes to create a baby, those 9 months that you watch every ultrasound and every heartbeat, and it takes 9 months to create a human being, and it takes seconds for an AR-15 to take that away from the surface of this earth.
Now, this website says that Veronique Posner appeared way too composed, that she wasn't crying, her eyes weren't red, and that's not how a grieving mother looks, which I gotta say is just among the most ridiculous things I've heard. I mean, I've interviewed so many people in grief. I've experienced grief myself, and to say that there's one way that someone should grieve is beyond ignorant. Now, unless you frequent these types of conspiracy websites, you probably never see them, and again, we would never mention them. But James Tracy, here he is again, is, as we said, a tenured professor at a public university. Taxpayers pay part of his salary. In Newtown and beyond, his comments are triggering intense outrage, as you can imagine. In a statement, Newtown, Connecticut First Selectman Pat Lodra took aim at Florida Atlantic University, saying, "Shame on you too, FAU, to even have someone like this on your payroll. I can assure you, sadly, that the events here in Newtown unfolded exactly as are being reported, with a horrible outcome, the violent death of 26 innocent people, including 20 children." Now, we invited Professor Tracy to come on the program. He's a professor. He talks in front of students. We would think he would be willing to defend his thesis. He declined. Our invitation stands. John Zarella, our reporter, went to try to find him. John joins me now. So you went looking for this guy, this professor. And again, we like to offer people a platform, and if they have an argument which is valid, you know, we want them to express it and see if it actually holds up to scrutiny. You caught up with him. What did you learn?
Yeah, and Anderson, we absolutely tried again today to get him to come onto your program live this evening, or at the very least to give me an interview on camera to explain his positions. And Professor Tracy said that he just was not willing to do it at this time. So we went to his house this afternoon, and he respectfully declined to come outside and meet with me or talk with me at all today. He did say during 2 telephone conversations I had with him today, during the first conversation I had with him, he said that he would provide me an email response to some of the criticism that he has been under, the fire that he's been under. And he says in part in his email response that his observations have been reduced to headlines and sound bites, placing him in a severely negative light. He goes on to say he's confident he's put forth questions befitting any decent and reflective citizen, journalist, or scholar. And he concludes by saying, "I apologize for any additional anguish and grief my remarks and how they have been taken out of context and misrepresented may have caused the families who've lost loved ones on December 14th. At the same time, I believe the most profound memorial we can give the children and educators who lost their lives on that day is to identify and interrogate the specific causes of their tragic and untimely demise." End quote. Anderson?
So I know you also asked the president by the way, what is he a professor of? Is it like media studies or something?
Yes, in communication. He's in the Department of Communications. That is correct.
Okay. Interesting, the guy who's in the Department of Communications does not want to communicate to the media or address this in the media at all. But you asked the president of this college, of this university, FAU, about it. What did she tell you? Are they standing by him?
Right. We talked to President Mary Jane Saunders, and they are clearly distancing themselves from Professor Tracy.
We want to make it very clear that he was speaking as an individual. He was not speaking in his role as a professor at FAU, and the university has a very different statement about the shootings, the terrible tragedy that took place in Newtown, Connecticut. The university does not support this position, and I personally am heartbroken about the additional stress to these families at this time.
Now, there's no word on what the university could or would do, Anderson. He is a tenured professor, as you mentioned, and in fact, the blog that he writes on is not in any way affiliated with the university.
Now, look, people are free to express themselves as they want, but I think, you know, if he's a legitimate professor, he should be willing to defend his statements. And again, I just want to reread what he said on his personal blog, because in that statement he gave, which, I mean, it's sort of kind of a non-apology apology, you know, the old, I'm sorry if I offended anyone from how my statements were taken out of context. I mean, I'm not sure what the context is of this. From his personal blog, he says, "One is left to inquire whether the Sandy Hook shooting ever took place, at least in the way law enforcement authorities and the nation's news media have described, And then he suggests that there may have been, quote, trained actors working under the direction of state and federal authorities and in coordination with cable and broadcast network talent to provide tailor-made crisis acting. As if, like, I mean, I don't even know how that would work, that the news media would somehow meet with government officials and then somehow hire crisis actors who I've never even heard of to then go into Newtown, no one else noticing, and somehow pretend to be, I don't even know who, grieving parents, or pretend to be law enforcement personnel. I mean, it sort of is stunning to me.